right. Hopefully we can get this going. You there, brother? Mm. All right. So it's good, folks. Tonight we're trying a little something different. We're testing out one of Facebook's features where we can, we can have a live podcast. Uh, I wanted to interview my buddy from the Netherlands. His name's Rube, Brother Rube. Hopefully he'll join in here soon. Right, so yeah, I guess we're just waiting on Brother Rube to join. Hmm. You there, buddy? All right. There we go. Yes, sir. Hey, how
Hello.
you doing?
I'm good.
Sweet, man. What's the deal, Pickles?
Not much. Just give me a couple of seconds and I'll be right in front of my camera, okay?
Oh, okay. Sounds good. Sounds good. So, as I mentioned earlier, folks, we're doing something a little different tonight. As you'll see, my normal font didn't come up, my calm down. But, I've been fortunate to meet some pretty cool people from around the globe in my tenure as this thing I purport to be. And well, this is one of the interesting, unique fellows I'm fortunate to have met. And he has an interesting story that I would love for you all to get an opportunity to hear. What's up, Brother Rube? Brother Rube! What's up with you, man?
Hello. Hey, I'm good.
You
Nothing
want me?
much is up. I'm just looking forward to this conversation, basically.
Very nice. So, if you wouldn't mind, just because the people who do view my show, the one or two people who check it out on the first run, if you wouldn't mind, introduce yourself, give people a little bit of background on you.
Mm, what type of information are you looking for?
Where you from? What you like? Just several things. Some of the things that you've disclosed to me before. Just to give people a frame of reference for who you are and where you're coming from.
All right. Well, I guess the most broad thing is that I'm from Norway.
Norway, sweet.
Yep.
So is Norway in the Netherlands? I'm bad at geography.
Is Norway in the Netherlands?
Yeah, is it considered the Netherlands? I don't know that part of the
No,
world.
it's its own country.
Okay, very good. Yeah, this the
I'm in
Scandinavian.
Scandinavia.
Yeah, Scandinavia. I said Netherlands, and I'm thinking Scandinavia. Yeah. Okay. Well, cool, man. Well, awesome, awesome, awesome. So, you and I, we've been talking. Oftentimes after my podcast is done airing, we catch up and you know, we've sort of regaled each other with life stories and compared experiences and whatnot. And I think that you have, well, a very cool life. There are a lot of similarities between things that we experienced growing up. I myself, I'm on the autism spectrum, and if I don't want to overstep, but as you explained to me, do you want to give people insight into that part of your life?
Yeah, I am on the autistic spectrum,
Mm-hmm.
what they used to call high functioning, which is now verbal, I think.
Okay.
Like it's verbal versus non-verbal instead of high functioning versus low functioning.
Oh wow.
Personally, I think the new definition is a better one simply because high functioning was highly misleading.
Mm.
Like it got me in trouble a lot of times. Like my doctors and stuff, they would have certain expectations, and I would be like, I can't do that. And they would be like, but you're supposed to be high functioning.
Right.
And they don't understand what high functioning means. Like it's high functioning relative to the autistic person sitting in a corner, rocking back and forth, never able to speak.
Right.
That
Right.
doesn't necessarily mean high functioning relative to the norm. You know what I mean?
Right. Right. That's a great. Well, thank you for that breakdown. I think that that's very informative for a lot of people who don't understand.
Yeah.
Um,
So I'm a high functioning autistic person, but as a human being, I consider myself relatively low functioning. Like, yeah,
okay. All
there's a
right.
lot of struggles, like, and we will be leading into that with the main portion of the conversation as to why I made a lot of choices that I made.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was tested for several years
Mm,
because at a young age, I started studying other human beings,
mm,
specifically body language and behavior.
mm.
And that made me extremely good at mimicking being quote unquote normal.
Mm. Yeah.
So when someone meets me, they don't think, oh, you're so obviously autistic. Like that's, and even the so-called professionals, they don't stand a chance at discovering that. So it was when they started like actually testing my brain
Mm.
that after one of those sessions, they were like, yeah, you're autistic.
Oh,
Like,
wow.
there's no way you're not because your brain doesn't function the way any other normal, quote unquote, again, because I know some people are offended by the word normal.
Hmm.
Personally, I'm not, but I'm
Right.
trying to be polite. Uh, it just didn't function the way that they would expect. Like,
Mhm.
it was estimated that I perceive 40% more on all my sensory organs.
Ah.
And that sounds like that on face value, that can sound like a gift
A
and a
superpower.
brag.
Yeah. Right. Right. Right.
Yeah, but that's not always the case. Sometimes it is the case, I will admit, like it has its benefits, but it has downfalls. Like everything in life has trade-offs.
Right.
It gives and it takes. And when it comes to this, it gives me extraordinary memory.
Hmm.
Like math is very easy to me because I can remember every single math equation I've ever seen, like
Right.
all of that kind of stuff.
Right. Right.
And obviously, that brings benefits when it comes to testing because teachers rarely make up their own questions. They often copy problems from the book, and I will remember having done them, so I remember exactly what the answer is.
Right.
But it also brings extraordinarily high levels of pain.
Yeah.
It is painful when you walk outside and you see 40% more light than
Mm.
what you should. It is painful to hear 40% more sound.
Hmm.
It is painful for my skin to feel 40% more itching, scratching from my clothing, and all that kind of stuff. Like, it's a trade off. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
whining about it and I'm not bragging about it. It is what it is. And
Right.
that's it.
Yeah. Well said. You know, my experience isn't so different from yours in a lot of those ways. It's like, because I kind of went through a trial by fire. You know, my circumstance growing up was, I'm 45. They didn't know. Pardon me, it's warm in here. They didn't know what autism was during the time I was growing up.
You know,
So it's like, I was just odd. I realized that everybody else kind of moved to a certain rhythm, and mine was askew from theirs. And it's like you, I spent a lot of time sort of studying people and learning how to mimic behavior and things of that nature, because I didn't what seemed normal in the way of social acting for most people, it just went straight over my head. It didn't make sense to me. When you would see somebody like have an emotional moment where, you know, everyone is like moved in the same way, you know, I kind of sit here and I would realize like, why is that moving to you? If it's a extraordinarily like sad scene in a movie, it's like, you know, I'm like, okay. But if it was you know, if it's something that a lot of people got excited about, like, you know, sports and things of that nature, I'm kind of like, okay, you know what I'm saying? But it's like, you know, you learn how to
Yeah, I know
mimic.
exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah, you kind of learn to mimic what other people are doing. And oddly enough, I did learn to get enjoyment through a lot of those things. My gifts sort of lent me in the direction where it's like, I think in on all accounts I would technically qualify as, even though it's like, as you mentioned earlier, it's probably not the proper terminology now, but high functioning, in that it's like I got a lot of extraordinary gifts that came along with mine. Like even before I became this thing I purport to be, you know, test taking is a breeze. My friend showed me a two-chord song on the piano when I was 16. Learned one other song, and then it's like I went off and I said something's wrong with music, and I started creating my own system of music. So even when I like write for bands now, it's like you know, I have to show them how I put the sounds together, because I don't follow traditional chord structures and things of that nature. And they're like, why'd you do this and that and that? And I'm like, it sounds right, doesn't it? They're like, yeah, but I would have never put it together like. And that's the way it ends up working out. And that it doesn't just work with music. I taught myself how to cook. I teach myself languages. You know, you get a lot of gifts that come along with it. But what you were talking about in terms of sensitivity and things of that nature, I'm fortunate that in my experience growing up being like abused, like through a good deal of my childhood, I had to learn how to focus, and I know that you know, I'm not unique in that way, but I had to learn how to focus through the sensory overload. Like even now, if I can't watch television and talk at the same time. Like there are a lot of people who can focus through, they can multitask in that way, but it's like I hear it so richly and deep. Like I can hear like that high pitched buzz the behind the broadcast. That I can hear that, and it's like it grates on my nerves. So yeah, it's like it's a lot of trade-offs, man. But if anything, I'm just sort of edifying your experience with it. You know, obviously we have very different we have very different versions of this gift, and I call it a gift. I call it a gift. You know what I'm saying? We have very different versions of it, and we had to go through different pressure tests to learn how to use our respective gifts. You know what I'm saying? And that was, I mean, like, I'm glad that we have that one thing in common. Something that I'll say, and then I'm gonna shut up because I really want to get into why we're shooting this podcast, because it's like I think you're fucking phenomenal just for even sharing this story. But how you did it, I'm excited to get in all that. So I'm gonna say this real quick. All right. What I describe being on the autism spectrum like, and this is the way that I explain it to most people. Um, Imagine every kid is born with a gun, right? Every kid is born with a gun. Most kids, they're born with Glock 9s. And some of them, they become sharpshooters with these Glock 9s really fast, these little handheld guns. Pop, 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 pop. They're really, really good at aiming and firing. Kids who are on the spectrum, it's like we're born with sniper rifles. All right. And when we're little, these sniper rifles, they're really huge and they're cumbersome and they're difficult to wield and aim and things of that nature. It's like, but when you get put under enough pressure, you learn how to develop strength behind it. You learn how to focus your tool. Soon you can hit all of the same targets that the kids who have these little Glock 9s hit, but whereas their fire and their potential, if we're likening potential to a bullet, falls off after about 300-400 yards. With that sniper rifle, you can boom, you can hit that target that's a mile and a half, two off in the distance. So yeah, that's how I've experienced it, and that's how it kind of seems to me. So that's why when you and I talk, a lot of what we talk about is very mechanical, and because it's mechanical, it doesn't really, there's no need for it to become overly emotional. If it makes sense, it makes sense. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But we can compare perspectives sort of calmly and efficiently, and that's one of the main reasons why I like talking to you. You have a very mechanical mind. Anyway.
Yeah, I don't like to become emotionally invested in anything that isn't a loving relationship. Like I haven't, of course, I have a strong emotional investment to my friend of like 22 years now.
Mm.
And my brother and my mom and, you know, my dead dad, stuff like that. I have emotional feelings. They are very real and they are ever present.
Right.
But when it comes to perspectives in general, like, you know, in the US, for example, it's very polarizing to have any political leaning.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I don't see why that should be the case.
Mm.
Because both sides have merits that
Mm-hmm.
can be combined. And I don't see them as diametrically opposing. I see them as complementary in many ways. Like in some ways they are opposing, but
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of ways they are complementary and they could be combined into something better. And that's how I like to view anything. That's
Mm.
just an example that, like, I always want to see the useful sides of anything, even if it's something I strongly disagree with. I can be like, okay, you had one or two points there that I actually understand and I can learn something from that. I reject your view as a whole,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but those parts, I will take them. Thank you for giving me those points, and I will expand my view of everything from that.
Very
And
nice.
that's that seems so obvious.
Yeah.
I
You
don't
know,
understand why it has to be adversarial.
it's funny that you mentioned that, and it's something that I cover a lot in my work. I think one of the main issues is there's a mechanism to it. So when people, when they build identities around a particular like label or affiliation, when they build an identity around it, and then they sort of operate from a competitive mind state. They're constantly looking for someone or something to define themselves against. And as such, people tend to, drift into tribalism very easily, especially here in the United States.
Yeah,
The United States is probably one of the most competitive countries ever. And, even down to the subcultural level, when you start getting into like the what are considered minority groups here,
yeah,
most of those cultures are based heavily in competition. And if and even like just poor people, so it's not just the minorities, it's just like poor white people too. The lower you are in the social stratification system over here, is the more given to competition you are. And every single thing that sort of serves to define you as a person becomes grounds for competition against someone who you would define as other. You understand what I'm saying? So it
yeah,
doesn't, they don't even understand each other. The left doesn't understand the right doesn't understand the left. They can't see, hear, or consider anything above dominating those they perceive to be their opposition. You
yeah.
know,
And they don't want to understand each other. They
yeah,
want to. They have this pathological need for the other side to be evil,
yeah, but that's
because that just like if you're evil, that justifies me being bad. Like
Right.
all my bad actions is because you're worse.
Right.
So I can be as bad as I want as long as you're worse, and your badness is defined by me. Therefore, I can be as bad as I want. Like
Thank
that's
you.
such a circular, ridiculous argument that just keeps going and going forever.
Dude, that is brilliantly said. I couldn't have said it better myself. Absolutely. It's like, and again, this is one of the main things that I teach about in my work is this sort of trinity. I refer to it, it's narcissism, competition, and aggression, right? The more you practice self-idealizing, that is sort of morally whitewashing yourself, your self-image, and your inner story in your mind, which goes towards justifying you and your inner sense of justice, which in itself is paradoxical. But the more you practice self-idealizing, is the more aggressive and competitive you become. The more competitive you become is the more you practice self-idealizing and or narcissism, and the more aggressive you become is the more you end up practicing the both. And ultimately, these things they lead down to like this overtone value, which is greed. The more you practice narcissism, competition, and aggression, is the greedier and greedier you become. And all of these things, they lend themselves to you becoming an agent of corruption and or a corrupt life form. So it's like, think about it like if you were in a body and you were a recombinant life form, meaning a pathogen had landed on the body of the planet and fashioned you, that landed on a pathogen had landed on your body and fashioned. Oh man, listen, I lost track of my objects in there. So imagine like it's just the difference between a disease and a body. Imagine you are a cellular building block belonging to a body, and it's like because you're a cellular building block belonging to the body, but you're sort of a recombinant life form, meaning that a pathogen had landed on the body and fashioned you out of a bunch of structural building blocks and inserted its RNA coding into you. Basically, I'm describing humanity to you. Then as a virion, you get to choose which system you will serve. Are you going to serve the disease or are you going to serve the body? You're in a neutral state and you get to choose. Are you going to serve the disease or are you going to serve the body? And the more you sort of practice narcissism, competition, and aggression, is the more you lean towards parasitism and or corruption, and the more you practice sort of reasoning and honesty and sort of understanding and syncing up with how things are independent of your inner dialogue, is the more you sort of lean more towards the coding of the body. That's how I describe it in my work. So a lot of these people, especially those who are in a really competitive mind state, they make themselves corrupt. They make themselves corrupt because they keep practicing self-idealizing and self-worship all the time, looking at how awesome they are, congratulating themselves on everything, and it's a it's a snowball effect. It's a
Yeah.
snowball effect.
And it's kind of confusing to me because there's so many healthy outlets for being competitive.
Uh-huh.
Because I love competing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I'm a highly competitive person, and I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with it.
Okay.
It's just that, and at the end of the day, I'm like, it doesn't mean that I'm a better person. It
Well,
just means that at this skill, I've devoted more time and effort. And if they did the same, they could probably do the same. Because, like, I love playing video games,
uh-huh.
and I'm born with, like, because of, the sensory thing in my head,
Mm-hmm.
it has greatly reduced the functionality of my arms.
Right.
And obviously that's a detriment when it comes to gaming, because you have to click your keyboard and aim with your mouse and do all that kind of stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
I love just being better and doing great and all that stuff, but it's like,
I
you
have a
want to say
question.
something really bad.
I do, but it's like I'm listening. Continue.
And um, but that feels good in the moment and all of that kind of stuff, but it's just a video game. Then you turn off your computer and now it's back to real life, and none of that matters. Like, I'm not dominating anyone in a capacity that actually matters. Like, I just make myself feel good by playing that game and doing really well, or maybe I do really badly and I feel crappy about myself and I reflect on how I can do better next time and blah blah blah. But when the computer is off, it's off and it's gone. Like, I'm done.
What I wanted to interject was, have you ever watched Dragon Ball Z?
uh no, I haven't watched that specific anime.
Okay. Well, there's two main characters, and you don't need to know the backstory
Goku.
for to understand where I'm going with this. There's Goku and Vegeta. They're the two main Saiyan characters. They're rivals, right? Now, the reason why I mention that is because there's a difference between Goku and Vegeta in the way in sort of what they seem to represent at a principle level. Goku is a competitive person, but he's motivated towards competition by a desire to know and surpass his personal best. Vegeta, on the other hand, he is a person who has serious insecurity and rage issues, and he wants to compete against people because his goal is to dominate others. He wants to
Yeah,
capture
I see what you're
authority.
going at.
Yeah, he wants to capture authority from other people. And you know, Goku, he wants to fight the strongest people he can come across because he wants to know and beat his personal best. So when you're describing this, and I make that distinction for people who are, I make that distinction for people who are competitive. Like, are you a Goku or Vegeta? Is your goal to dominate others, or is your goal to have something to really sort of refine your ability against and to see what you're capable of? Because I wouldn't necessarily label the latter as being a truly competitive person. If you're competing against yourself, you're a person who is trying to know and surpass your limits. You're aspiring to personal excellence in whatever it is that you happen to be focusing on. But if you're a person who just wants to dominate others, then you're competitive. And how that factors into aggression and narcissism is, in order to want to dominate someone, you have to want to feel superior to them. You have to want to
Yeah.
think that you are morally and inherently better than they are, and more deserving of attention, more deserving of praise, more deserving of opportunities, degrees of freedom, satisfaction, and rewards. If you don't have that mind state, then I don't necessarily consider you to be a competitive person. Like, even when you were into archery, you may have wanted to win the contest. I don't know, and I can't say, and only this is something that you can answer, but was there someone who you're like, oh man, did you focus on prevailing over one person more than actually doing your best, or did you focus more on doing your best, and if your best happened to eclipse the other person, then so be it? What is how did that work for you?
Uh, Rather than archery, I will choose gaming because that's a bigger part of my life and has been. I mean, has been.
Okay.
Uh, like, I've always been the kind of person that when I learn a skill,
hmm hmm
I will purposely do things that is highly likely to lose the competition,
mm.
simply because I want to see what happens.
Ah,
I want to see if it's possible. I want to see, like, can I do this? Can I do this highly unlikely thing? So I'm always pushing myself. Like, I'm perfectly willing to give up the W and gain an L if it means that I learn a new skill. Like, that's where I'm at. And like, and that's where you're coming at, like, that's the self-improvement part. And I want to be the best version as possible because, like, I noticed this when I played ping pong with a friend, for example, he was
Mm-hmm.
very like focused on just doing what he knew
Mm-hmm.
over and over and over again because he knew that would beat me. And
Right.
I kept doing these outlandish things that I knew I'm probably going to lose because of this.
Right.
But if I do this enough, I will master this and then I will be the best.
Nice.
That's how I become the best, by doing things that people aren't willing to do because their pride is in the way. Like they're not willing to lose this game in order to gain anything. Like, and I don't relish a win unless I actually gain something in terms of skill and knowledge.
I
It's
get.
boring. Like I find it uninteresting. It's not because I'm a good person or anything. It's just like it's boring. I find it boring.
I think that that disqualifies you from being competitive in the way that I sort of I understand it, and I guess maybe I should make some delineation in there. So I'm glad that we're having this conversation. I think that that's pretty fucking dope, man. But yeah, you kind of fall more into the Goku category. Like if personal betterment, achievement, and like overcoming personal limitations and finding ways to like the and I would say it like this: the person, your friend who you were playing in ping pong, it wouldn't matter if it was that person or if it was just like a player two in the game, in like a game, like a Mortal Kombat style, like versus the computer. If it was the computer, you would probably be, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems like based on what you're describing, you would be motivated in the exact same way. You're like the goal isn't dominating the person on the other end, it's dominating the mode or coming out on top of the mode, learning something. I mean, again, that's something that you can only answer, but that would be what I take away from what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, if I win and I gained nothing in terms of growth, then it's meaningless to me
Right.
personally. Like that's just a personal preference that I have. I need to learn. I need to have something in my arsenal that didn't exist previous to that game.
That is,
Always. Like, yeah.
no, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was about to say that what you just said there was an excellent way to segue into the point of what we were going to talk about tonight too. Just finding a new way to beat something. That
Yeah.
was you.
But
Go ahead.
before we start,
Go ahead.
is there a link I can send my friends? Because there's a couple of buddies of mine that want to listen in.
Yeah. Here. Let's see.
You can just send it on Messenger or
Yeah.
something.
As a matter of fact, the one that I sent you, send the for. Can you forward that link to them? Is that possible? Or
Um,
inbox me
it,
with their
it's kind
inbox
of
me.
more of a button than a link,
Okay. Well, here's what we'll do.
so
Um,
I'm not
can
sure.
you tag them in the can you send me their join them to a conversation and I can share the link in there. So short, create a conversation in a messenger, um, and then just add them in there, and I can go ahead and post the link in there.
Add them to the
Well, yeah,
message.
you don't have to add them to our specific message. You can create a new one, and let's see. You can create a new conversation and add all of us into it.
I am so
Create
bad at
room.
all.
Here, well, here, now here's what we got. I create room. So I started a room, right?
Okay.
Now I just sent you the room. Add your friends, your buddies to the room.
But it seems like they will be joining the chat itself.
Um, hmm.
Because when I click on this, it automatically shows my webcam and stuff like that. So it seems like they would be joining.
Okay. I mean, if that works.
But they would just be I think they just want to watch, not participate. So like
Oh,
if
okay.
there's just a link to your
Well, yeah,
podcast in
actually,
general.
just send them a link to my page because this should be broadcasting live on my page. So if you go to my page, you should be able to see it there, and you can just tag their names there, and it's public. So
Yeah,
if you go to my page, you should be able to.
I think I have the link. Let's see.
Cool.
Okay.
Cool. So you all right? Cool. You tagged them in. Very nice. All right. So and this is going to be on playback too, so they'll be able to check it out. But at any time. So anywho, the point of it was we were talking about the segue. Learning how to beat things in different ways. I spend a good deal of time in my work sort of describing the mechanism behind addiction. And for the last couple of years, I've been really helping people sort of get a grasp on how it works at a mechanical level. So it made it so it wasn't this nebulous cloud that was always hanging over their head and constantly threatening them when or if they came in contact with this substance that they never actually beat inside their mind. So it's like I was trying to give them a sort of conceptual frame they could use to better understand why they were drawn to substances to begin with. And in listening to your story, you gave me a breakdown that I had never even thought about considering, and it's very practical. And it's like I don't fanboy over anybody, but it's kind of like, yo, dude, that's my guy. So it's like I've been real excited to get people to hear your story and your thought process and how it all came together. And it's like I'll bow out and let you describe it from here. But it's like sort of walk us through it. So going back to the point of where you have you by estimation experience 40% more sensory input than the average person. You can pick it up from there if you'd like.
Yeah. So, you know, it became after a long time, it just became simply too much to handle. Sometimes you're just empty, you're like you're done. Like I can't, like there's no matter how much I have to give, I'm done.
Right.
So I started doing like benzodiazepines, and over time I sought out stronger and stronger versions because they lose potency
Yeah.
as you get as you accumulate, because benzos, they like all drugs, caffeine, nicotine, alcohol, anything, like it accumulates in your body because it has a half-life, and if you ingest more than the half-life can get rid of, then the potency will go away. That's
You
an
build up a tolerance.
inevitability whatever you take.
You build up a tolerance to it. Can
Yeah,
I ask you?
tolerance.
Can I go ahead? I'm sorry. I just want to add one question and then I'll be quiet. Do you think that you experience because you experience 40% more sensory input than the average person that maybe that caused the drug to sort of have a heightened effect on your system? Do you think that's a possibility?
uh I don't think so,
Okay.
because that's a different type of feeling. because
Okay.
that's not really a sensory organ. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
we're talking more about hearing, sight, touch, smell, taste, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
It's this is, I don't know how I would describe being drugged in that sense.
Hmm.
So I don't think so.
Okay.
Maybe, I don't know, because I have nothing to compare it to. So like it's possible, but I have no relative standpoint to my own because my viewpoint is the only point I can view. So I can use creative empathy and all that kind of stuff, but at the end of the day, that's just guesswork. So I'm not going to make any type of claim there.
Okay.
Um, but what I can say for sure is that it lessened my sensory input because
Hmm.
that's what drugs do, right? They
Right.
numb you, they make
Yeah.
you numb. So, like, it made the world darker, it made sounds less imposing, it made touch less frightening,
Hmm.
it made foreign tastes less off-putting, and you know, all that kind of stuff. And that's what I was looking for. And it worked for many, many years. It worked. And that was my goal. Like my goal, because the, there, there's like a stigma around drug addiction that people think it's just this one thing.
Hmm.
And that's not true.
Hmm.
There are different reasons to take drugs. Some people start taking drugs because maybe they went through a hellish child labor and now they need Vicodin. A year later, you find yourself a drug addict and you're just the run-of-the-mill working mom, for example.
Hmm.
And here you are, an addict. Like, what the hell? That's not what people think of when they think of a drug addict. They think of like this thieving, deceiving,
Degenerate.
like criminal,
Right.
degenerate criminal that will do anything for a fix. And that can certainly become you if
Hmm.
you allow yourself to become subservient to whatever drug you're taking.
Right.
But that's not necessarily the case. Some people, they just don't want to live in pain. They
Mm.
don't, and that's one group. And the other main, like the two main groups is one just don't want to be in constant suffering. And the other group, main group, they want to escape the world.
Hmm.
They don't want to experience anything. They want to be gone, but not dead.
Wow. Well
You know what
said.
I mean? Like they just want to not feel,
Well
but they
said.
don't want to kill themselves just yet
Hmm.
because they want to explore other options.
Hmm.
So they just take so much that they are completely out of it. They don't experience, they don't remember anything.
Mm.
And I belong in a group where I just didn't want to suffer. So I maintained like a very stable dosage where I could be lucid and functional and seem completely normal to the people around me while on drugs. That was my goal the entire time. Didn't
Wow.
always succeed. Not going to not going to say that I didn't miss dosage a couple of times, more than a
Right.
couple, but that was my ultimate goal. And that's very different than wanting to escape reality. Because
Hmm.
the escaping reality thing, I think that's much more severe and dangerous.
Right.
And it shouldn't be looked down upon. Like those people, they need your help.
Right.
Like they don't need you to criminalize them or
Mm.
to punish them. They need you to sympathize and understand that they are in so much pain that they can literally not be in reality. That's if there was ever a clear like cry for help, that's it.
Nice. As I said.
You know what I mean? I had a friend like that, and he wound up overdosing. Like the only times he stayed remotely stable, because we often bought stuff together and all that kind of stuff. Like, and when he lived with me, I made sure that he didn't take more than he needed. And he was functional. But as soon as he left my home and my vicinity and, you know, uh, socialized with other people doing drugs,
Right.
he would go way overboard, non-functioning, non-existing, because he was just so sad. He was sad all the time. He was a great guy. Like, he had such a great humor. His energy was off the charts, way higher than mine. Like, his energy levels, they were off the charts. But he lost his sister and his dad to cancer in the same year when he was like 13. So, and he was never able to get over that. Like, some people are just like, oh, well, I did the same thing and I'm fine. Well, yeah, good for you. But you're not this person.
Right.
We don't all cope in the same way.
Right.
We react differently. And his reaction is not invalid just because you had what you perceive to be better reaction.
Right. Right. Right.
Like, his reaction was certainly not healthy, but it was understandable. And like, so like that was very sad. But for me, it was always about, how can this help me heighten my sense of reality? I don't want to escape it. I want it to stop being so imposing that I can't embrace it.
Right.
You see that, like, those are opposite goals.
Right.
The escaping, and I wanted to escape pain so I could embrace.
Exactly. Very nice. Nicely said.
And so I started doing these like Russian drugs, extremely strong. They have a 48 to 50 hour half-life.
Jeez.
That's insane. Like, they take forever to get out of your system. Like, it's hell. And I took like 6 milligrams of them, which may not sound like a lot, but if you're never taking them before and you take 2 milligrams, you will not remember what happened 5 seconds ago.
Wow.
They are strong.
How did you get them?
There's always people.
So,
I had my contacts.
right. Oh,
Still
don't.
have them on my phone, by the way.
Right. Yeah,
Because you know why that's going to be important after a while. Like, access to me is an important thing. So like, but which portion of this story do you want me to jump to? Like, do you want me to just jump to the quitting phase? Or
I'm just, hey man, take it, walk with it, man. It's like, I love all the explanations and the foundation you're laying leading up to it, because even though what you have to say in that way is pretty fucking hardcore by my standard, by what I think, and by the way, feel free to fucking curse in this. But it's like,
yeah,
even though I think that is pretty hardcore, and I'm excited for people to hear that too. Much of the foundation you're laying leading up to it, people need to understand that too, because it's not just some guy doing a badass thing. It's there's all sorts of understanding that needs to take place prior to understanding why, or prior to hearing what you have to say, so that people understand why your approach is so significant to begin with. Do you understand what I'm saying? So I
yeah,
think that you're pacing
yeah,
yourself in the right way. You're doing what you need to do. Walk with it. Take your time.
yeah. So like, and the reason why I'm putting so much emphasis on why
Mm-hmm.
is because that's important as to how I quit too.
Right.
Because I had a specific goal in mind.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the goal was just to embrace reality as much as I could. And jumping forward a few years, and we're hopping into the archery thing that you mentioned. I was put in this situation where I actually had to take a really strong drug, opiate, for my back, because when you draw a bow, you train one side of your back a lot and the other one basically not at all. So that like dissymmetry created like a pull on my spine that made my spine like curve to one side. And that hurt so much that I was just on the floor crying every day for a couple of months. And after those couple of months, I went to my doctor and I was like, I'm in incredible pain. I need something. And he gave me this very, very mild dosage, and it was completely ineffective. So I found a street dealer that was willing to give me 4 times the dosage. So I would break up those pills into lines where they were smaller, because if I took a whole pill, I would overdose and just stroke out.
Right.
And I kept taking that until I was up to 165 milligrams per day of oxy.
Wow.
Which is 4 times the strength of morphine.
Wow.
And I took that every day for a long time, and then like at a certain point in the fuzzy state I was in, I was like, hey, when I think about it, I haven't been in pain for 2 weeks. These pain meds don't serve me anymore. They're useless. Next day, I was done. And I had hell for 2 weeks, but I was like, they don't serve me. So I had like this bottle of 160 of those 20 milligram pills on my table that I could look at, because that's where the idea of the future story was born. That this is a drug I didn't choose. I didn't want to take it, and it doesn't serve me anymore. So I'm done. I'm quitting today, and tomorrow I'm clean. And then I went through withdrawal, which is the same as heroin withdrawal. Like, it feels the same. You're seriously, it is pure hell. Like, it's just pure pain and misery, mentally and physically, all the time, 24/7. But the half-life is 6 hours. So it's very quick. Like, after a month, you're back to normal.
Wow.
You just have to stop. That's it. And since I never had a want to take it, there was no, this is also where addiction gets split up. There was no psychological addiction to that drug. Because there's a difference between psychological and physical. The physical is just a ramification that you will face if you stop. The psychological is whatever in your mental landscape that demands that you take this. And it's the latter one, the psychological one, that's the difficult part.
Right.
If you don't have that, then you can stop and you can be around the drug without any danger, because you won't be tempted, because there's no part of you that actually wants to take it. There's no need.
Right.
So after a month, I was on the phone with my brother and I filmed it while I poured out the drugs in my toilet and just flushed them down, and I was done.
Wow.
And then, but I was still taking high dosages of benzos. I actually increased my dosage of benzos with 50% during that phase to get through that phase, because it was so painful.
Right.
So I was on 4 milligrams before, 6 milligrams after. That's a 50% increase, and I kept doing that for 3 years.
3 years.
Yeah. And then I started realizing, like, hey, the benzos, they're not really working anymore. They're not doing what I want them to do. They're not serving my needs anymore.
Did they
And
stop? Did they no longer? So what you're saying is they no longer like suppressed your sensory faculties to the point that it made life tolerable. Is that what you're saying?
no, not no, because they did that. They
Okay.
did they did that part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
They fulfilled the part of suppressing my sensory input, but they also started removing other things that I didn't intend them to remove, like what I would call my soul.
Oh, okay.
They removed all feeling. They
Wow.
didn't just remove like the extra feeling, they removed everything.
Wow.
I didn't care about other people anymore. Like I didn't care what I said to anyone, if it hurt them, if it didn't. Like I didn't care, and if they got hurt, I would really ridicule it. I became like a terrible person.
So they kind of made you sociopathic.
Yes, yes, they made me sociopathic, and I didn't like that. And all of a sudden, my brother had a kid on the way, and all I could think about was how that was going to affect me.
Mm.
And it made me look within myself and think like, that's kind of fucked up.
Mm.
Like, shouldn't I just be happy for my brother, for whom I care so much? Like, why would I focus so much on how that's going to affect me instead of thinking about how can I make this as best for him as possible? And I
Right.
realized that it's because of the drugs. So like that was just the last drop. There's many other examples I could give, but I'm not going to go, it's years worth of examples. It would take way too long, but that was the last drop, the last straw. And I was like, I'm not getting out of this what I wanted, so I'm going to stop. But I had done some research. If you stop without any preparation, you can actually die.
Wow.
So I made 3 months worth of preparations, like gathering legal but very mild sedatives that I could use the first month of going through the detox, because I didn't want to die. I didn't want to stroke out, because you can just, these are anti-epileptic medicines.
Oh, wow.
So if you take them for wrong reasons and then you suddenly stop, you can get epileptic fits,
Oh man. So it's like
and they can
Tegretol.
stroke you
Okay.
out.
Okay.
And so I sat exactly where I'm sitting now, and I had 200 of them in front of me. And I was like, tomorrow, I'm done after those 3 months, because I had planned, like, I'm going to have this much, done the math, and it's going to be enough for a month to keep me alive, and blah, blah, blah. And tomorrow, I'm done. So the day after, I just placed those 2 bottles right in front of where my webcam is.
Mm-hmm.
And I had them there for the next 6 months,
Mm.
while being unable to leave my bed or do anything, because and the reason I keep them in front of me is because I'm very like, and this is also the reason I didn't want to be put like seek out some rehabilitation center or program or anything, because I'm like, if I have to rely on uh, a reality where all of this is out of my control, then who's to say what I'm going to do when it is in my control? Who's
That
to
part.
say that I'm not going to just like choose to go back into the same pattern?
Right.
Because this has to be my choice,
Right.
and I'm choosing to be more powerful than the drug. The
Mm.
drug doesn't own me. I chose the drug to serve me. Now it doesn't serve me. Therefore, I'm done. Like it's really it's very simple. Like it's not like some huge thing. It's just that's my mindset.
But this is the thing that I want to interject is the fact that it's like that is a huge thing. Just getting to a point where, you know, I met my brother when ran into my brother Donnell tonight when I was in the store, and we were talking about a similar subject, and he was talking about, you know, he had an addiction to food, and at a certain point he realized that food no longer served the purpose that he wanted, so he decided he had to change his eating habits. And the reason why I even wanted you on the podcast tonight, to share your story is ultimately getting past it. It requires a certain level of honesty. It requires bravery. These are mutually inclusive things. In order for you to reach this point where you realize this thing didn't serve you anymore, you had to honestly assess what it was that you thought you were supposed to be getting from it, and then be brave enough to face what was going to happen without it there to comfort you when it had done so much to that point in your life. Like it, bravery and honesty are mutually inclusive things. And before you decided to get off of these things, you knew it was going to hurt, but you had to be
Yes,
on you had to be honest with yourself that it was doing more damage than it was doing good. That's
yes,
that's the beauty. That's the reason why what you did is so important. And it started with just a moment's resolve where you had an honest moment and you made a decision. You made a decision. Your inner sense of accountability held you to that decision through all the pain, through all the desires to just make it go away. You got on the drug to begin with because you were trying to make the pain go away. And now getting off the drug meant introducing this thing you were trying to escape before back into your life. And you did it anyway, like a fucking
yeah.
champion. Like
And
a
it comes back. Not only does it come back, but it comes back many folds. Like
thank
it's
you.
several times stronger because like when you've taken a drug like that for so many years as I did, your brain has stopped producing the chemicals that would naturally calm you down. So
Right.
I was in a state of constant panic, like just I would hallucinate sounds all over the place, and they were
Wow.
so loud they would crush my head. I would just try to sleep all the time. That's literally all I did. I took so much melatonin, like fuck tons.
Wow.
Like I just so I could try to sleep as much as possible because it was unreal how painful it was. Like it was the hardest thing that I've gone through in my life. Like this is something I've shared with people without any hesitation. Like I lost my dad to cancer when I was 9.
Hmm.
That was, in honesty, child's play compared to this.
Wow.
That's not because I took his death lightly. That's something I cry about to this day. But this, the pain, the intensity, and the longevity of that pain, like 6 months of just sheer agonizing, nightmarish hell.
Right.
eh, I don't know how to describe it. It was just inhuman to go through. But like for every day, my conviction grew stronger rather than being weakened because I was like, well, I've invested a week into this. I can do 2 weeks. And then I came to 2 weeks and I was like, I can do a month. And I did a month and I'm like, hey, I bet you I can do 2 months. And I just kept going. Like I just stuck to it. And I kept like lifting up the bottles to my face, watching them, listening to the pills crackling inside the bottles. And I watched them and sometimes open the bottle to just smell them and like look at them and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like looking at the pill right in front of me and like, you can take all of my pain away but you will bring back all the suffering that I'm currently trying to get rid of. So I'm not doing this. Like, I'm done. I'm just done with you. Like, I thank you for the service that you have provided. I'm very thankful to those drugs because they did save my life. I don't regret starting at all because it did save my life. I'm not promoting drugs. I'm not promoting addiction or anything. I'm just saying for me personally, it was needed. And then quitting became needed.
Mm.
So I did both. I started easily because I was like, this is necessary to my life. And then it came to a point where I'm like, stopping is necessary to my life. It's that simple. It's not some complicated matter. It's just, do you serve the purpose that you intend, that I intended you to serve? If you don't, I'm done with you.
That
That's
again
it.
is just, it's brilliant. It's how you did it, where you didn't put distance between yourself and the thing. I think that a lot of times that's the big mistake people make, and it goes back to how you explained it when we were talking about it in one of our past conversations. It's like, if you're, and I'm going to paraphrase what you said, but if your reprieve, if your relief from your addiction is conditional, then you never really escape it. It's always there. It's one opportunity away from you relapsing, and how you did it was fucking G. Like, that's how it's done. Like, you have to sort of bear down through the pain. You have to make, and I don't really like making agreements with myself per se, but I think in this case it might be necessary. You have to make an agreement with yourself that you are strong enough to endure the pain that comes along with letting go of something that brought you comfort. And then you have to have discipline. And what I refer to discipline as is your inner sense of accountability. Like, if you hold yourself to a specific standard, a particular type of standard, and you are not going to, you're not going to break your promise to yourself, or more importantly, you're not going to break, you're not going to lower your expectation of your resolve, then it'll carry you a far way towards knocking that. You see, and in my work, it's not just substances that people are addicted to. Something that most people are addicted to that they don't even realize is they're addicted to themselves. They're addicted to vanity. They're addicted to narcissism. Narcissism is in itself an addiction. It's an addiction to the identity. It's an addiction to self-idealizing and self-worship, and it gets you high. It's like,
Yeah.
whenever you want to feel good about yourself, whenever you want to get a quick little high, look in the mirror, take a selfie, do something for some attention.
Post something you know will get a lot of likes
It's
on
something
Facebook.
you thank you. Little things you can do to get this validation that you matter, and more importantly, this validation that that serves to edify and enhance your inner dialogue. When you're addicted to the inner story, and then deathly afraid of experiencing withdrawal, and or in the, withdrawal in the form of cognitive dissonance, whenever something comes along to invalidate or undermine your inner story, you're an addict. And it
Yeah.
really it really takes the same type of resolve that you demonstrated in overcoming your addiction to those two substances to really break the addiction to yourself. Like, you have to get to a point where a person has to get to a point where they realize, yo, this is doing more damage to me than it is doing good. I'm going to stop this behavior. This, and it sucks, because it's like, every now and then, like, a lot of the things that you see me write about in my posts have to do with me overcoming my own addiction to narcissism. you know, or my that's redundant, overcoming narcissism and or the addiction to myself. I I I used to be a raging narcissist, man. And you know, it comes from growing up in a circumstance where I was constantly devalued and abused and things of that nature. And then I got some sense of self. I got an identity. And then all of a sudden protecting and enhancing that identity became everything. And I was crippled by the fear of being embarrassed. I was crippled by the idea that someone might see me as being less than worthy. And I was constantly like feeling anger and aggression towards things that outshined me and that made me, and I felt envy and jealousy towards things that outshined me and made me feel less than. And it was a horrible way to live. And I'm so glad
Yeah,
that it's like my circumstance became what it was where I had to overcome it, but it's an addiction nonetheless. And
there are several forms of addiction.
uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Like something that changed my life is the way of the peaceful warrior.
Okay, expound on that.
Like I was introduced to this book via the Hollywood movie. Great movie, by the way. Like one of the critics said, it's like Rocky, but for the soul.
Hmm. Never heard of it.
And the main character, he is extremely good at school. He's good looking. He's very good at gymnastics. Like he's on the top of the world. He's high on himself to an extraordinarily high degree.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's just so full of himself. And
Mm.
then he meets this guy that does things that he perceives to be impossible.
Mm-hmm.
And the guru that he becomes, tells him like that he's an addict. He's like, I don't take drugs. I don't even drink coffee or anything. And he's
Mm-hmm.
like, but you are addicted. And it's like, to what? Well, for one, talking.
Mm.
You think you're right all the time.
Oh.
You need to express yourself. You need to express your opinion at
Mm.
any given time. Whatever is said, you have something better to say, and
Right.
you are addicted. You can't shut up. Like, you can't just be.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just be silent and listen to something that you severely disagree with and just take it in. Like, he doesn't say all of this, like, word for word, but that is the message, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, he can't just be.
Mm.
Like, this is a main character that has problems sleeping. He has constant nightmares, and that's because of his own demons, you know, like we call them. They're his demons. They follow him into his sleep, and he can't, therefore, they wake him up. He wakes up sweating and shivering and scared
Mm.
because he has made this avatar of himself that isn't actually real.
Mm.
Like, it's a fiction that he needs to believe in order to cope with his own reality.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
this guru sees straight through that. We're never actually made to know the guru's name. They just call him Socrates.
Okay.
Like, that was just like a name that this main character gave him to mock him. So they call him Sock, short for Socrates. So
Okay.
he's just called Sock, and and I thought that was brilliant. Like, when I listened to that, I was just like, that's blowing my mind right now,
Mm.
because I could see so much of that in myself. Like, I'm addicted to several types of behavior.
Mm.
Like, and recognizing that in yourself, that helped me recognize when the drugs weren't serving the purpose that I intended. Because I was
Right.
like, I'm just addicted now,
Mm.
and they're hurting me.
Right.
So I'm going to say goodbye.
Absolutely.
Like,
Go ahead.
yeah, so I was just like, I'm going to keep you at my side for as long as the physical ramification of this is going on. But as soon as that stops, then you're gone from my life altogether. Because that's when I've conquered you. If I throw you away now, I will stop taking you out of a lack of access. That's not good enough.
Right.
I don't, to me personally, that's not good enough. If you're in a facility for some form of addiction, like alcohol, drugs, whatever, then they remove your opportunity to get high.
Right.
Or get drunk or whatever. And to me, that wasn't good enough because that's not me choosing. That's me being forced.
Right.
And I need this to be my choice, because if it's my choice and I'm making this decision and I can stare at those pills every day through this agonizing hell, then I know that I've conquered it. And I can be around people who do those drugs. I can easily be around people who take those very same pills, and I'm not even remotely tempted, because it was always my choice.
Nice.
I chose not to take them, even though I had pills that I had paid ridiculous amounts of money for, like just absurd amounts.
Right.
And I chose to spill them down my toilet after having gone through that.
Right.
And after that, I have the confidence and ease of myself that there's nothing you can do, there's nothing anyone can do to ever tempt me, because there is no temptation to actually linger onto.
Right.
There is no lingering want. There is no missing it. There's nothing there. It's gone. And that's what I view as conquering. If I had been forced into a facility by, like, let's say I had gone through an intervention and my family guilts me into doing something, I would, as soon as I had access again, I would start doing it again. I would just hide it from them. So they would believe I've stopped, but I would know that I haven't.
Right.
But when I stopped, I told no one.
Oh, wow.
Well, not no one. I told 3 people. Those were the 3 people closest to me.
Okay.
I told them what I was going to do, because I knew that, realistically speaking, I am going to have to reach out to someone at some point. And that's not being weak, that's being strong. Like, admitting where you are faulty, that's a strength, because it makes you better. Allow the people that love you to make you better. Like, that's a good thing. So I figured I would do that. And they supported my decision, obviously, because I assumed they always wanted me to quit, but they didn't pester me. So I only told the people that accepted me for being a drug addict.
Wow.
But obviously, since they want my life to be the best as possible, they do want me to quit, But they're not going to pester me or make me feel like shit because I'm not quitting. So those people I told, and they were great. Like, they were really great, and they inspired me to just keep going.
How did they help you?
Well, you have severe panic attacks, because this is a drug that makes you extremely calm. So when you stop taking it after so many years, like I said earlier, your brain has just stopped making any chemical that would make you feel calm. So you're in a state of constant panic. Like, you're, the most anxious you've ever been.
Right.
Imagine being that 24/7 for 6 months straight.
Wow.
The most afraid and panicked you can possibly be, the most paranoid you can possibly be, all the time. So, like, they just told me, like, hey, we know when you set your mind to something, you do it. Absolutely. There is no in between. You either do nothing or you do everything, because that's, for better or for worse, that's how I function.
Right.
I don't do anything halfway. If I'm really set to do something, I either do it 100% or nothing at all.
Right.
Because half measures get you nothing.
Yep, we have that in common. If you do anything, if I do anything, if I set out to do anything, my inner sense of accountability is very strong. So if I do something that, if I do something that even I know is half-assed, then it bothers me to the core. It's like it's something that I can't live with. So like if I'm preparing, let's say, if I'm in a restaurant and I'm preparing a dish, and like a dish towel brushes past the plate and it hits the chicken or something like that. A lot of people are not even thinking about it. I'm like, the dish towel touched the chicken. I got to make it over again. Like it's just that's how that's how I am. If something is not right, actually, I had to spend a lot of time, especially after learning how to, or I would say, going through my withdrawal from narcissism, learning how to be okay with mistakes. But for the most part, yeah, I have to do things to the very best of my ability, and um, even though a lot has gone into learning how to make peace with the fact that my best effort is not always going to be perfect, I still try to be as thorough as possible in all respects in everything that I do. So I don't half-ass things either. If I'm doing it, I'm doing it, and it has to get done right. If not right, if not perfect, then to the very best of my ability, and
Yeah,
hopefully, I make
because
it.
that's the thing, right? Like, if I make a mistake, but I know that I did my best, I can live with it because I'm gaining knowledge. I'm
Right.
gaining insight, right? So I can be like, hey, the next time I will do better. I may not succeed the next time, but I will do better than this time.
Yeah.
But if I fail and I learned nothing, ooh, that's a tough pill for me to swallow. That's I can't.
Yeah.
I choke on that one. No, 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 no. I refuse.
Right. Right. We started talking about this, and I started getting into it a little bit earlier. In my work, when what I refer to as uh, conceptual substances, it's not like narcissism, and then a lot of people, they're addicted to authority, they're addicted to
Yeah,
competition, they're addicted to aggression. And as I'd mentioned in my last podcast series, aggression is it's basically inner rage coupled with a desire to transfer it into something external of self. So a person who's aggressive is a person who feels a lot of emotional pressure inside, and what they want to do in order to relieve that pressure is find someone to release that pressure into, and that's basically what it is. So anytime somebody, like, it's a lot of people who are consider themselves liberals, who are highly aggressive individuals, and somebody says a word that has a social, that's socially unacceptable in the current moral frame, and it gives them the license to unleash all this inner rage. Like, the person could use a word not even related to homosexuality. They could say the F word, and all of a sudden someone is like, oh, you said the F word. Everybody shut them down. Yeah. Everybody, let's end their career. Let's cancel them. And you're like, yo, dude, you like, you were at the ready waiting to shut this individual, waiting to just unleash on somebody because you have all this pent up aggression in you. You're addicted to releasing your rage into others. That's why you're so easily that's why you're so easily triggered, because you're addicted to releasing your rage into others. And the point of conceptual substance and breaking these down, and the addiction to competition. A person who's addicted to gambling, who's addicted to gaming, they're addicted to competition. They're addicted to the chemical rush they get. And that goes to the point of everything that I'm talking about. And it sort of brings what you were talking about in the frame too. In my work, I give the explanation for how addiction works in a mechanical level. In my work, I describe the ego as being an actual physical parasite that's located in the human body. It's sort of concentrated in the frontal lobes regions and then spread throughout the autonomic nervous system. And what this parasite feeds on, what it subsists on, is hormones and neurotransmitters, either ingested into and or produced by the human body. So it feeds on things like oxytocin, vasopressin, dopamine, serotonin, insulin, epinephrine, norepinephrine. Now this parasite, it has its own intelligence. And that it is the phenomenon we refer to as perception and or apperception. Now, what it is, how perception works is, it's kind of like a movie being projected into the authentic mind, the mind of the human, the authentic mind of the human. It's sort of a version of reality that supplants the actual reality as it would be experienced by the human as an organism, right? And how it works is this: the ego parasite basically controls perception, and it uses perception to basically steer the human host into pursuing and indulging in substances and behaviors that force their bodies to produce or acquire higher levels of hormones and neurotransmitters for it to subsist on. So for instance, let's say the ego parasite wants insulin, right? It'll use perception to alter reality in the mind of the human host, and it'll make the person believe that they want sweet and fatty foods. If the ego parasite wants oxytocin or vasopressin, it can manipulate reality in the mind of the human host to make them think that they desire love and affection. If it wants serotonin, it can make a person think that they want social inclusion and or accomplishment. See, this is the way that it works at a mechanical level. This is the reason why it's like so. It's like this. Think about it like this: because it's a secondary hunger, and the ego doesn't actually want the food itself that you're eating, like the ribs and the ice cream and all those other things. It wants the insulin. It's kind of like an itch you can't scratch. The ego will kill you trying to get what it desires from your body for you to either ingest or produce. It'll kill you trying to feed itself because it has no authentic connection to you as a life form. It's a parasite. It will destroy you trying to satiate itself. So, a lot of people, when they struggle with addiction, this is something that I like to explain to people who do struggle with addiction. I give them advice similar to what you give or what you did, and that is getting them to figure out how to put this fucking bug, this ego parasite, in check. See, you have a strong frame of reference. You're able to do it autonomously. I give people little steps to help them figure out how to do it. So what you're going to do is, I tell people you're going to write out a list of things that you're going to accomplish through the course of the day. And what you're going to do is you're going to accomplish tasks. And as you accomplish tasks, mark them off this list. You're going to physically write out a list. And as you accomplish tasks, you're going to mark them off the list. The reason why you're going to do this is because as you continue to accomplish things, what's going to happen is it's going to cause your body to produce serotonin. Serotonin, if you were to liken it to food for the ego parasite, it's kind of like starches. So it's like rice and potatoes. Once you start eating the rice and potato, once your ego parasite starts eating rice and potatoes and balancing itself out, then it's like the teetering, the perceptual teetering, it starts to level out. It starts to get like something in its stomach. It starts to hold things down. And then you stop letting that stupid little bug call the fucking shots. But again, it's all mechanical. It's all mechanical. And again, the reason why I'm so interested in your presentation of it is because I'm describing what I can see through a type of perspective that's been imbued to me. You're working from the experiential vantage point. This is something you lived through, and you have a unique insight that most certainly isn't taught here in America. Everybody's like, "Oh, you're broken, you're defective. Turn to religion, turn to God.
Yeah,
You're always broken." And you're like, "No, fuck that.
like,
Hey, I'm gonna tough this shit out like a G." And I was like, "Yes."
yeah, this is just personal. I'm not knocking anyone that makes this work. I'm just gonna make that clear as a disclaimer. Like, if it works for you, I'm happy for you, and live your best life. But for me personally, I hate the 12-step program because it requires surrender. And to me, that's the opposite of what I was doing. I was doing the opposite because surrendering, that's what I was doing.
You're
And
swapping
then
one
I was
addiction.
like, tomorrow I quit surrendering. Like, that's what I stopped doing. Like, I'm quitting you because I have surrendered my power to you for so long. Like, you served me really well for a long time, but then you stopped. And then you started poisoning me instead. And
Swapping one day,
at this
swapping.
point,
Go ahead.
our interests are not aligned. We are no longer seeing eye to eye. We are not on the same page whatsoever. You're an inanimate object that I ingest into my body. I'm a sentient being held as a freaking slave to you. And I refuse to surrender to that slavery. I'm gonna cut you down, and tomorrow I'm done. And the day after I was done. That was it. Like,
Surrender. That word that you said, and it's like I want to get to this, and I'm gonna let you get back to your point. The,
yeah.
all the thing I wanted to say is this: when you the 12-step program, the issue that you have with it is the exact same issue I have with it, and that is you're swapping one addiction for another. You're swapping one addiction for another. You're swapping a physical substance for a conceptual substance. And when that conceptual substance is no longer available, you end up going back to the physical substance. You can't do that. So what you did, how you approached it, I would endorse that 100 times out of 100 over going in a 12-step program, because the only thing they give you are conditional tools that will circle you right back to where you were before. If for whatever reason your belief system cracks, they give you a belief system to replace a drug with, and if that belief system cracks, you're right back at the drug. your
Yeah.
approach your approach
Yeah, and and what I don't like about it is that, like, they keep calling themselves addicts after being, for example, 20 years sober. I don't like that.
Right.
The day after I stopped, I had all the physical pain because, like, we're talking about a 48 to 50 hour half-life. So obviously I didn't feel strong effects the day after. The strong effects didn't start before like 4 days.
Right.
But it took so long for the cumulative amount in my body to
Mm-hmm.
go away enough for my body to start convulsing, and I started like being like this,
Wow.
like shaking and like just twisting into knots and all that stuff. Like, it took some time,
Wow.
but the day after I stopped, in my mind, I was no longer addicted
Mm.
because I knew I have stopped. I've made that decision. There was no like doubt in my mind that I was going to make it
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because, like, I'm done.
Very
I
much
was
so.
willing to die. I would rather die than being beholden to that thing. I'm like, if I can't do this, then what's the point of me being sentient? If I can't make this choice, then what's the point of me having so-called free will? Like that's a fiction if I can't make this choice. I made this choice, and there's no ifs and buts about it. It's absolute.
Nice. That's good,
It
man.
is. It was absolute. Like, and I don't consider myself as a recovering addict or like an addict that happens to not take drugs or whatever. I regard myself as a human being, and that's it.
Yeah,
Like that. That's
who
like
did
the
some
point.
shit before. You're a human being who just tried some shit before. That's
Yeah,
it. That's it.
exactly. Like there's nothing more to it. Like I'm not some victim of that thing because there's a thing that I really detest
Mm.
for myself, and that's viewing myself as a victim. I refuse to be that because that would mean I would constantly feel attacked. I would constantly find ways to feel sorry for myself, and my life is so much harder than yours, and blah, blah, blah. You know, the whole victim mentality that's so popular these days. I don't, I'm trying to not say bad words here. Like, I just don't like it. I don't like it one bit because like I was in let me put it like this. I was in a lot of autistic support groups
Mm-hmm.
and there were so many victims there.
Right.
And I said like one thing and then there was this other autistic person that got really offended and he was such a victim. And he was like just listing all the reasons why I should feel sorry for him. My response was that your victimhood bores me.
Oh wow.
That was my response. I wasn't trying to be mean or anything. It's just how I see it. Because if you want to be a victim, you can choose to be that. If you want to be miserable, you know, like if that's your thing to be miserable and unhappy, like who am I to stop you? But don't you try to impose your victimhood on how I speak and how I see the world. That's
Yeah.
not like you don't get to dictate how I see the world because I refuse to imagine a world where being autistic is automatically being oppressed because that was a narrative that us autistic people were being oppressed
Mm-hmm.
because there's too much blue light and the world is not catered to us. And I'm like, we're a vast minority. It's not efficient to cater the world to us. The, the world is catered to the masses. You know what I mean? Like it is catered to most people. What will soothe most people most of the time? And that's logical. If you're a business, you will try to make your product suitable for as many people as possible. That will often, but not necessarily, make it kind of opposed to what autistic people would like that product to be like. That's not them hating autistic people. That's them trying to make their product as efficient as possible. That's logical. That's rational.
Mm-hmm.
That's not us being uh,
Oppressed.
pushed down by the system. That's the system being efficient to as many people as they can.
You know what? Yeah, I'm in an interesting bent on that. That's an interesting conversation that I think that we could unpack a little bit more. I think that, and I'm with you in saying it's like I'm very much against victimhood narratives. Period. Because victimhood narratives don't just begin with oppressed people, and begin and end with oppressed people. They also they're most commonly abused by people who are just like social parasites who live and benefit at everyone else's expense. And they're always like, oh, poor us, poor me, poor this and that. We deserve to take things. This is how it works. Like even if you like look at like so like say for instance like entertainers. I come from the slums, this and that, and what do with their riches? They act like jackasses and become really, really aggressive and narcissistic and things of that nature. Like a lot of times, people use, and that's something you were pointing on earlier. People use, you know, they use the perception of someone else being worse than them to justify being bad themselves, and
Yeah.
that is like the end. That's the flip side of the coin of victimhood. If I'm a victim, then I'm justified in taking out my anger and frustration and taking from you. I deserve, give to me because poor me. And in that sense, you and I, we both hate victimhood. I think victimhood, I've never known a cowardly person who, when they weren't in a position of authority, wasn't in a position of victimhood. I hate cowardice. A coward is a
Yeah.
person who's afraid to face reality. A passive coward is one who freezes in the face of uncertainty and who seeks to surround themselves with effects, people, groups, and whatever that sort of serves to validate, reinforce, and reflect their inner story back to them. And an aggressive coward is one that feels rage and insecurity and uncertainty. And instead of facing and dealing with those things, they go around trying to infuse those feelings into other people so as to relieve themselves of that pressure. I hate cowardice, and cowards just happen to be victims all the time. But ironically, they also do a lot of victimizing as well. So if I look at a woman who's been sexually assaulted, I'm not going to be like, "Hey, stop being a victim." I'm like, "No,
No, no,
we
because
need to get."
that is an actual victim. There's a difference between being victimized and defining yourself as a victim, right?
Thank you, and we're agreeing on that point. We're agreeing on that point. I just know I want to make sure that we delineate them so that there's no confusion. Like if you look at, there are many oppressed people in the world who are
Yeah,
just living hand to mouth and who are
yeah.
constantly being assaulted by really aggressive and parasitic social systems. And you have to acknowledge that they are going through what they're going through, and those who are preying upon them are very quick to say, stop being a victim, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, stop being a victim, stop being a victim. And you're
Oh
kind of like,
no.
well, y'all are victimizing these particular people. So I focus on truth and reality and what can be measured in the way of material impact, not necessarily on people's inner stories and the agreements they make with themselves about how much they're suffering and why they have to continue suffering. Like when you build an identity around brokenness, I have a problem with it. It's like, but if someone is kicking you down and not allowing you to stand up, I have a problem with that too. So I'm in the there. I'm like this. My position is very much, you're not going to be broken around me. You get to choose. You're either healing or you're defending why you deserve to be hurt, but you can't do both. You either letting go of the illness or you're holding on to it because you wanna transfer it into somebody else, but you can't do both. If you're trying to heal,
Yeah,
hang with your boy. I
yeah,
got you. If you're
yeah.
trying to get,
Like,
go ahead.
yeah, like I'm like, yeah. So if I didn't make it clear, like I perfectly understand and empathize and actively support any person slash people that are actively being oppressed.
Right, right, right.
Like I I'm not denying that there are victims
Hmm.
because like, but that's so to in my mind that's a whole world apart from the victim mentality
Yeah,
because like because like there's the victim is objectively being screwed over.
right,
They don't have any autonomy, they don't have any choice, they're just being put in this painful position regardless of how they think, how they feel, or anything. That's a victim. But that doesn't mean that they think of themselves as helpless and oh poor me.
right, right.
Because in my experience, at least, I'm not saying this is an absolute truth, but in my experience, real victims, they go into survival mode and they try to find ways to overcome.
Right.
Real victims, they don't go on Twitter and talk about how much of a victim they are every single day for 10 years.
Right.
I'm sorry, but they just don't. Like, if
Right.
you're so privileged that you have the time to sit on Twitter and talk and talk and talk about this and that, I find it hard to believe that you're an actual victim, because if you were, you would be busy trying to solve your predicament.
Hey,
Right.
again, we see this very much in the same way. The only reason why I even mentioned the differentiation is to make it so that everyone understood that that isn't what was being said. That you weren't saying you weren't you weren't you weren't victim shaming. You
Mm-hmm.
were making a distinction between people who build identities around victimhood to the tune of benefiting at the expense of others. I think that's a fair point. Like if I'm a victim because being a victim is a way for me to benefit from a social circumstance, and that's an easy way to get a win, then it's like, I find that very cowardly. So my thoughts um, in that way are very similar to yours. I hate the victimhood mentality because I've never seen it not inextricably bound to cowardice. Like it's just one and the same. When I look at a lot of the aggressive people here in this country, especially things like racists and things of that nature, there's always a victimhood mentality. And then not victimhood mentality only, but there's a victimhood narrative. Oh, we're being replaced. We will not replace. Jews will not replace us. Yeah, 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 yeah. They have like a whole. There's a whole backstory. There's a whole thing, and it's
And
like, and there may be, and not to take away from all points of legitimacy on what their grievances might be, but when you use said narratives to try and justify you having the right to take your anger and frustrations out on people you perceive yourself to be morally superior to, well, then that's when I have a problem. And it goes back to the point again you made earlier, talking about, well, I need to be the good guy and you need to be the bad guy, because as long as you're bad, that means I can be bad, and my badness is justified by your badness because you were bad first and you were bad worse. And I'm like, yeah, I see you.
that,
You're a cowardly
that's
little.
some real 6-year-old mentality.
Thank you. Thank you. Just exactly. You said it
It's
right.
it's such a childish and really, like, because we call this woke culture, and I find that highly ironic because I've never seen people be more asleep than woke people, because like they and like it pisses me off because it's so highly represented by people who are not actually within that group.
Right.
Like, I see white people all the time speak on the behalf of black people,
Hmm.
and I find it disturbing, to be honest,
Hmm.
because I'm of the mind, and correct me if you like, or like interject if you disagree, but in my mind I see it like this: I believe in the cause of equality,
Hmm.
so I will stand by black people's right to be just as valued by society as white people,
Hmm.
but I will never ever take the position of speaking, because that's not my place. I will stand by the speaker as long as it's not a freaking white person, because I don't give a shit what you have to say because you don't live that life. Like, can you imagine how ridiculous it would be for me to take that stance? Because, like, I'm a white male in Norway, an extremely white country, by the way. Like,
Hmm.
we're very white, as
Hmm.
most people know. And so I can't even take the stance of speaking to how it is to be a white male in America. How the hell would I take a stage and speak on behalf of BLM Like,
Right.
how would I ever do that? I don't know how it is to be a white person. How would I even in America? How would I possibly speak for the black person in America? How would I possibly convey the perspective of the black man in America? Like, it's not possible for me. It's
There are a couple of people who done a decent job of explaining it, but they never do it to a degree that they're talking in place of black people. It's like just sometimes when you're in this country and you're in this social climate, when you are of this skin color, you're just not given access to platforms to speak from. And if you are given access to a platform to speak from, it's usually when you represent something that has an alternative interest. So, it's like for instance, when you have people like Jesse Jackson or Al Sharpton or these individuals who are these polarizing figures in the civil rights movement and things of that nature, turns out that a lot of them were CIA operatives, and they were there to sort of sell a different narrative and to sort of steer the crowd in a direction that wasn't necessarily geared towards the advancement of black people in terms of realizing equality from within the American social political and justice system. So there have been a few white people who speak about the ridiculousness of racism that have done well, like Jane Goodall, I think that's her name. She speaks about the ridiculousness of racism,
uh,
but
just 2 seconds. I'm sorry to cut you off. Remember where you're at. Everything turned black on my end.
oh wow, okay, all right. Did your phone
I
die?
can't see you.
I can see you still. Let me see. Um, hmm. I don't know what happened. But you know what? Hey, you know what? We can actually pick up at a different time cuz it is a little bit late
But
right over here.
but continue your point first.
Okay, well, I'll finish that out, and then we can probably wrap up, and we'll just pick it up at another time because I really enjoyed this conversation with you. I thank you kindly. Jane Goodall is, I think that's her name. She's a person who has taught about the ridiculousness of racism for years. She's never taken upon herself the mantle to speak on behalf of Black people's experience, but she
Yeah.
does provide context and sort of, I want to say, instruments and tools that help people learn how to conceptualize the experience from outside their bubble. So
Yeah.
yeah. um
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think that you shouldn't speak. Like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just like, I don't think that they should take leadership roles. Like, if they're cast into a leadership role involuntarily because of what they say, like, that's out of their control, right? Like, that's
right,
not something. But there's so many of these people that seek that out so they can have some kind of righteous indignation.
right.
Like, I'm so righteous and you're not. And I detest that because it's false on every single level. Like, it's just false. Like,
Agreed.
if if there was a platform that was denied to a black person but I was given it and they wanted me to speak on their behalf, I would. But like, take the Oscar nomination for what's the actor's name?
Chadwick Boseman.
No, the guy who played the Godfather.
uh De Niro, Pacino.
Al Pacino was a secondary Godfather, but his dad in the movies.
Was it Marlon Brando? Is that what it was?
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you. Marlon Brando. Like, he was given this huge platform because he was such a great actor, like
Right.
one of the best. And then he chose to give that up to a Native American woman that then proceeded to talk about Native American oppression in America.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And she was booed off of stage. She was booed all the way. But he chose to disregard his Oscar. He didn't accept it. And he gave his allotted time on that stage to her instead, so she could speak for her people.
Right.
I thought that was awesome. To me, that's awesome.
Indeed.
Because he didn't take her place. He didn't like pretend to be some kind of, like, he has Native American blood, I understand. Like, he has some kind of like a skin in the game. But he chose to give it to a full-blooded Native American woman so she could speak for her people on how they are mistreated by Hollywood and misrepresented.
Mm-hmm.
And in my opinion, that was brave.
Right.
That looked brave to me. Like, that was awesome.
Right. Right.
Because
Agreed.
he didn't try to use his fame to be righteous or be better. He just gave everything up to let her speak. And that was amazing. I thought that was amazing.
Wow. That is amazing. That is amazing.
Yeah, you can find that on YouTube if you search for it, like Marlon Brando and Native American stuff. You can probably find it really easily if you just search a few keywords.
Absolutely. I'm pretty sure that I will. I'm gonna look that up a little bit later on tonight. I figured out what went wrong. My my camera overheated because it's like I
Oh,
guess it's set up for about an hour time, and I think we're running on like close to 2. But yeah, that's we dude, this has just been fucking awesome. Um, yeah, man, it's like I'm definitely looking at the Marlon Brando clip. Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast tonight and for just sharing your story, man. It's very inspirational. I think that you know, hopefully somebody who's struggling with, maybe addiction themselves will get a chance to see like how you going through the experience and how you deciding that it was no longer going to have a control over you. Hopefully it gives them some resolve. Again, I think that in the American narrative on the subject, oftentimes people are led to believe that they are powerless and that there's nothing that can be done and that they must surrender to the drug at all time and know that it will always have a power over them. And here you come along and you blow that theory completely out of the water with results that that speak volumes over what with results that speak volumes over what uh, convention tells you you're supposed to be able to experience.
yeah.
So
Like, I believe it's about conviction. Like, you have to believe in what you're doing. Uh, you make a choice not because society forces you to, but because you want to.
right.
That's the important key factor. Like, you have to want to do this thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's where, because as I said way earlier in this conversation, like, there's two sides of addiction. There's the physical and the mental. And it is the mental part that's the real enemy.
Right.
The physical pain is just pain. You can endure pain.
Mm-hmm.
Pain is temporary. It always is. Pain will subside over time. You just have to wait it out.
Right.
And I might sound like I'm trivializing it, but believe me, I am not. I know exactly how hellish that can be. I understand. I'm not downplaying that pain at all, but when everything comes to the end, it will subside. It will not last, but you will. Your conviction, if it is strong and absolute, it will be strong and stronger and stronger and stronger over time and the pain will become less and less and less until it doesn't exist anymore. It's the mental part. You have to want this for yourself. If you don't want to be a victim your entire life, you have to make the conscious decision that you are done. You have to. There is no way to not be a victim if you don't actively choose mentally that you are done.
Very nice.
You can't accept surrender. Surrender is not an option if you want to be victorious in your detox.
Right.
If victory is your goal, do not accept surrender. Like, you go all the way, no matter what.
Right.
It will hurt like hell, and it will make you feel like you dread the day you were born. But in the end, you're free.
Amen. Amen. All right.
Yeah,
well,
you're free.
We're going to have to sign off here, good brother, man. I appreciate you more than you know. Sorry that my camera went out on me, but it's like hopefully next time it'll have a little bit more shelf life. I guess it gets overheated with the battery pack in here. The Phantom battery pack, it overheats after a while, and that seems to be what happened here. But all in all, man, this has been a great discussion. Thank you so much for sharing your insight and sharing your experience with us, man. Again, I hope other people were able to really glean something from it. I very much admire your approach to handling this. And again, I think you're a dope dude, man. And even if everything that you went through only served to help put you in a position to give other people tools to help them combat, addiction, and not just combat it, but understand it on a fundamental level. And then also the different reasons for why people pursue addiction. One, to sort of, as you were mentioning, learn how to function within reality, and then others, because they want to escape reality. Just giving people those sort of conceptual tools. You've done a great service for people tonight, man, and it's just an honor to talk to you, good brother.
Yeah, I hope it can help some people, because, like I mentioned, the Peaceful Warrior earlier,
Mm-hmm.
and a guru called Sock in that. He says this line that this is a service station. I provide service. There is no higher purpose.
Okay.
That resonated with me greatly. Like, if I can make my experience serve someone else, then that's awesome. Like, that would be the ultimate realization of what I did. It would be way greater than my own overcoming. If I could help someone else overcome, it would blow my mind. I can't, there are no words I could ever say that would express how awesome that would be for me.
Well, I think you did a good job of taking steps to realize that tonight, even if no one comes to you directly and tells you that is the impact you made. Hopefully someone hears this and you will make the impact in spite of whether or not you get verbal confirmation on it. So that said, I'm gonna have to go ahead and get out of here, man. But again, I appreciate you and thank you so much for your time. And I look forward to doing this again.
Yeah, me too. Thank you for having me, and yeah, I appreciate the time you gave me. So
excellent. Yeah. My guy. Hey, listen, yo, guys, I shoot these on Mondays and Wednesdays. You follow me on Facebook, Mondays and Wednesdays, Facebook Live. I shoot these podcasts, and then also, I fly these over to the YouTube channel. So, yeah, man, you check us out. Rube, do you do any sort of output of media content anywhere?
I do, but not anything remotely relevant to this, and I'm not here to promote anything. So,
So honest, you're so candid. Well, very good. Well, listen, guys. Hey, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch up with you next time. Much love to you all. It's your brother. I'm out.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.